The Universal Periodic Review is a new mechanism that allows civil society to work with governments around the world to guarantee that human rights are realized at home. The Universal Periodic Review was actually created when the UN decided to move and transition from a Commission on Human Rights to a Human Rights Council. There are a lot of reasons for that move, many of them political, but most importantly, civil society has done what it always has done by making sure it's foot in the door and working diligently to make sure that human rights are protected and promoted. The Universal Periodic Review was created in 2006 and 2007 when the UN Human Rights Council was first established. So the amazing thing is that it was intended just to be one small process, and in many ways I believe the governments were hoping that it would actually weaken the human rights treaty bodies, such as the Human Rights Committee, the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights Committee, the Racial Discrimination Against Women Committee, and the Committee on the Rights of the Child. They thought in many ways the governments would be able to ask the questions, and therefore they move away from the legal and more political and be able to weaken human rights. So there were many concerns when it was first created. So I was actually in the room when it was created. It was a midnight decision. China was doing a lot of things to try to prevent it from actually happening. Mexico was actually hosting and chairing the meeting. And then at 3 minutes before midnight, they did agree on 19 June 2007 to create this new Human Rights Council, and more importantly, its procedures and its mechanisms. So the Universal Periodic Review was considered one potential new mechanism that might be able to produce something to help someone somewhere. And I have to admit, when it was first created, many of us had a lot of concerns in civil society. The states that were organizing the final negotiations were really stressing it was going to be a state-driven process. So what we tried to do is make sure that civil society was included. And we only had a couple of paragraphs and words. But from those couple paragraphs and words, I think we're able to revolutionize the UPR process to make sure that civil society is not just a part of, but is the core participants in this process. The Universal Periodic Review consists of 3 main documents. The first document is directed and created by civil society. Civil society works in the state to make sure that all voices are represented. So what we're able to do then is write reports. And what happens is all the reports that are written are then compiled by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. What we were able to do in this process was to make sure that we identified all the significant issues and, more importantly, work together to do combined cluster reports. It's absolutely crucial, and it really laid the foundation for our combined advocacy efforts. The other report that's absolutely essential is the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. On top of compiling all of our reports, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights reviews all of the treaty bodies and the special procedures, as well as the UN specialized agencies, programs, and funds, and looks at all the issues that are either outstanding or that have been offered as suggestions of what the U.S. should concentrate on. So I think that also is important, is that we do participate with the special rapporteurs that have been visiting the United States. We've been organizing their visits, which is absolutely crucial. In most cases, when special rapporteurs visit states, the countries dominate their agenda. We were able to make sure that civil society was able to coordinate their agendas to make sure that they see what's truly happening on the ground. The other side is we've also been participating in the human rights treaty bodies. So the Committee Against Torture, the Human Rights Committee, and the Committee on All Forms of Racial Discrimination all have recommendations. The important part of the UPR is we're then able to say, you were supposed to do this, but you didn't do it, but maybe you just got too busy. So this is a nice friendly reminder. So the UPR then is a space where the Office of the High Commissioner gathers all the outstanding recommendations and says, this is the human rights concerns that the committee has had and the UN has had in various circumstances and conditions throughout the US engagement, and nothing has been done. So if you look at these 2 reports, they make 20 pages. So it's half of the UPR process. The other 20 pages is based on the government report. And in that case, I think it's important how we have influenced that through the dozen of city visits to make sure that civil society's voice was represented. In the end, unfortunately for most NGOs, there was no inclusion of their voice in the government report. For the United States, they did come and they did listen. I think they began to learn, but they weren't able to learn quick enough to include economic, social, and cultural rights. And the way that they argued that it wasn't included is woefully inadequate. I mean, to talk about the freedom from want that Roosevelt talks about and then say economic, social, cultural rights is not part of our culture misses it. If Roosevelt wrote it, then the problem is we're 6 decades too late, and we have to keep working on it. So we were able to introduce that. So in the end, before we meet in Geneva, there are 40 pages of text that should include civil society's perspective, and that is the foundation for the discussion. Those 40 pages were crucial. It was brought up today many times, and more importantly, from that, there will be another text, and that'll make the complete package. So when the U.S. comes again in 4 years, that will be the basis of the discussion. So we really did frame and create the beginnings for the dialogue that will continue at the Human Rights Council, and the U.S. is now hooked into the process, and the cycle gets tighter and tighter and smaller until our rights are realized. Because the next treaty body will be the Human Rights Committee on Civil and Political Rights, and we'll have the questions from this UPR and say, what have you done since we last met? They'll have to have something, and it'll keep bringing the cycle to show that it is a cycle. It's not a one-time event. It's not Earth Day where you meet once a year, forget everything, and then come back again to Earth Day again, say we love the planet. It is every 4 years, every 2 years, every 2 years, and it keeps getting tighter. And most importantly, I think we're seeing the beginning where we will actually have meetings in the U.S. There's a follow-up mechanism for the UPR, and in 2 years, the U.S. has to produce another report. That report will have to reflect what we see as changes in the daily living conditions of the people in the United States. So we'll just continuously wrap the U.S. to make sure that people's lives are changing in a positive direction. The people who came here and told their stories, I believe will be able to tell a story within their lifetime of how things changed based on when they first came here and when they first started this process. So this is the UPR. I think it is another important tool in our toolbox. It's not the only one, but it's one that we should engage in, and it's very important to continue the process. And we'll see how the U.S. record of ratification will change over time, and we'll see then how this will really become a process for the people. Most importantly, it should be something that we don't have to do in Geneva. Human rights should be on the agenda of every politician and every policymaker. The UN, in a way, is a friendly reminder to say, I know you got kind of busy with everything in life, but guess what? It's 4 years again, and how are we doing? In a way, it's like a marriage between the people and its government. And the government makes certain promises when we start dating, and then once we're in the relationship, they just forget. And so what we're doing is a friendly reminder to say, if we're going to stay together, we've got to make our commitments and live up to those. And if you don't want to do that, then this is what's going to happen, and there's consequences. So I think we're able to do that. We're able to bring our voice. If you look at the concerns raised by the states, they're consistent with the critical issues brought forward by civil society. So I think the 10 points are definitely 100, and we have a lot of ways to be able to influence this process. But more importantly, we have to make the change at home. I think what's really important is when you look at this, even though it's supposed to be state-centered, it was we the people driven from the beginning. And what we did was we're able to look at examples of other UPR processes and what has happened in other countries. I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of indigenous peoples that had already been through the process. So I was able to learn and try new things and to organize along those lines. And then the best part was being able to work with the vast U.S. Human Rights Network and work with everybody in a more consistent, creative process through the steering committee, and then also with the staff closely. And so what we're able to then do was look at what are we going to do that really goes to the next level. So it's definitely for the people in the United States, But more importantly, we know if we actually elevate the process, we can actually engage in a new, we can really engage to bring the UPR up to a higher level. And then I think this will help people around the world. So what we began to do was conference calls. We're beginning actually last summer. I remember some of the funny moments where I'd be in a class discussing things and I'd walk out the back door and then be on a conference call with the Human Rights Network with everyone going, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And these dynamic conversations that really, you could feel the energy of what was possible. And then just the work, the dedication, the work of being able to participate at every step in the process. And I think when I first started this, I think I had maybe 10 steps for how NGOs could participate, and now it's over 100. So, as things would happen, it was always on my mind, I'd just take notes and think of new things and then send emails to people and say, what do you think if this will fly? And we kept adding. And I think right now, we have a really good model that if any civil society anywhere was saying, what is UPR? How do we participate? We can show them how to do that. So I think we'll have a lot of lessons learned to be able to share with others. This morning, the United States presented its first report to the Universal Periodic Review. So we'll always remember 5 in November. It's good. It was just the beginning, though. What was really important is throughout this entire week, we built and created what would happen today in that room. So the week of November 1st through the 5th, we had dozens of side events. We had side events that brought civil society together to talk briefly about their recommendations and educate governments continuously who are drafting and working on their questions. And then we also had specific side events that allowed exploration in the depth of the important issues of human rights, the challenges, but more importantly, the creative concepts that we can come up with that can change that and make a difference in the daily lives of people. So by doing that, we're able to then build awareness for the UPR. Most of the times when a country has their UPR, you can hear crickets. And I think what we did was we actually worked through creative ways to make sure that there was a buzz throughout the entire week. I know we did something first time that had never happened at the film festival in the evening, and more importantly, even the dancing and getting people together. We actually had the Office of the High Commissioner there in the evening. We had civil society from Geneva there. A government or two popped in who are also at a UPR. Other civil society from other countries going through the UPR came. And that's important because we're going to be in this group for the rest of the UPR. Mongolia will always be reviewed. These countries are ones that will be here with Maldives, and we can network and work together and expand that. So that was quite crucial, I think, this week and what we're able to do. That then had the U.S. standing before the world for the first time saying, this is what we are and this is what we do. But more importantly, by our organizing, they were actually trying to claim that they engaged and included civil society. And the truth is, civil society demanded that the U.S. include, and most importantly, do what they're supposed to do. When the UPR was created, it said there must be civil society consultations. The problem is most states have gotten away with not doing it, and I hope by our model, more civil society will be inspired to take similar actions and to organize the way that we have. Top one is preparation, to work with and reach out to new networks and to allow everyone to understand this is the human rights framework and this is how we can organize together, and to be able to present that clearly. So I think first and foremost is preparation. We really work diligently to get our reports and to collectively write those reports. That's crucial. Many countries and many civil society do not come together. Everybody wants to put their report first. They think their issue is most important. And the true reality is human rights is important. That is the process. And we really lived human rights by doing this. We didn't allow the larger NGOs or certain specific voices to dominate. We actually learned to listen to each other first, to actively listen, and then to advocate appropriately based on how we learn from one another. So preparation is essential. We're able to get our reports in and have them in on time. I know we also did some things that haven't been done before, and that during the summer we had 3 conferences at least, or meetings, to share what was done. So a lot of people write their reports and think that's done. But the interesting part is at every stage, it's always just more at the beginning, and most people don't understand that. So when we finished the reports, we had a meeting at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, and we had an all-day conference. And we then shared what the reports said and how we did them. But we also met with the indigenous peoples of Vietnam, and they said what they had just been through with their UPR, and we had a discussion. And that's what's also important about the UPR is human rights are universal, and we can learn from each other what other people have done. And that's why I think we learn from them, and our model will then be able to teach others. So I think that's crucial. The other is, I think, involving social networking and new media. So the idea of the Testify project. And the truth is, only a certain number of people are going to write reports. It takes a certain breed. And I guess I'm one of those policy wonks in that way. But everyone should be involved. And so it's how to make the UPR a tool for everyone to be able to use. So I refer to the UPR as the gateway drug to human rights. It's simple. It's only a 5-page report or a 10-page report, but it has to be even more simple. So the Testify project was aimed at just small videos expressing people's concern about specific human rights, and also a little recommendation of what can be done to change that. So I think that was just the beginning. I think many other countries will hopefully take it to the next level. But I think engaging with social networking was also important. And then the final one is what most people don't have, that long-term perspective. If they get the reports in, if they really get creative and try to expand the scope of participation, then how many people are really going to come to Geneva and speak and lobby with delegates? And I think what we were able to do was all 3 levels. And so there were a couple times where it would just be 1 or 2 of us, but we were able to do a training and bring people who had never been to Geneva before to get the training with NGOs here in Geneva. So I think that's important. We network with local Geneva NGOs, and we're able to do training to teach them about the UPR and get accustomed to the building. But then we also came to other sessions, and in other sessions we started side events. So it wasn't just we're going to all parachute in the week of. Too many people think they can do that, but we really were able to come starting a couple Human Rights Council meetings out, and then to bring in and to participate. So we were at June and at September. And both were significant because it kept building the movement and the momentum. So that way, if you look at what happened today, that's a result of thousands of hours of hundreds of people meeting and sharing their stories and expressing to the world, we have human rights and we want the world to know what they are. And more importantly, we know what needs to be done, and we will create the political will to change and to create a movement that realizes human rights in the United States. So this morning, you had an entire, they had at least 3 soccer teams of U.S. officials. Over 30 were represented. And the truth is, if we didn't do the work we did at home, they would have gone with a lot smaller delegation. They wanted to have a large delegation to be able to answer all the questions that we were raising. So that's, I think, a testimony to how well we were able to do that. When you look at what the government said, they were gonna, they're bright, they're articulate, they're gonna talk about the gains, they're gonna frame the issue. And the important thing is, they weren't able to just do that. It is true. It's important in the United States that it moves forward, and the U.S. has always aimed to try to improve. But the point that they didn't say was that it's always the people that push the country to realize those dreams. It's the people that come up with the vision. It's the people that have the values. And what we're able to do then is you could hear the voice of civil society today and them trying to claim those issues. So I'm pleased with what was brought forward. The problem and the challenge for civil society is you can't talk today, traditionally. What we do is we educate delegates, and they share that information and put it into the form of questions and recommendations. The good news is that I could tell and see on the faces of the delegates, the different meetings we had, and how that produced the questions. And I think we did a great job at doing that. And the government, I think, let us down based on other UPR processes I've seen. Everyone that comes to the UPR brings something to the table and says, this is what we're going to do, and this is a sign of good faith of how we're going to do that. The U.S. government failed in that. They could have brought the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and said, there's a review process, and we're going to adopt that, and this is a sign of good faith that we're going to do this now, and in March, we're going to show progress and keep moving forward. So while we talked about progress of humanity in the United States, they didn't give specific examples today, and that's a tragic failure that could have been done, unfortunately. On the other hand, the U.S. did something at the next level. Only Switzerland hosted a joint press conference after their UPR, and Mexico had a much smaller meeting with civil society. So the idea of a town hall meeting was absolutely crucial and important, not just for us today, but more importantly for the future, for other NGOs and civil society that will come here and say, why can't we have a meeting? We should be able to talk with our government. You should be able to meet with us, not just give statements and not be able to actually provide follow-up. So that was important. The one thing that didn't come out that the government should have done, if they're really committed to this framework and moving forward, they could have given out specific dates now. We're all here. We're all busy people. Let's name some dates, and let's be symbolic. Let's say we're going to meet Martin Luther King weekend, or that Monday on that holiday, and discuss and realize that. And it fits in with their whole speech about where we're going and how we're doing it. It would have been perfect. Let's meet on March 8th, International Women's Day, for CEDAW ratification, because we know we'll be here later in March. So there are opportunities, and the government has got to be more creative and step up to participate in that way. So once again, if they don't, we will. So I'm not too worried. I have full faith that we'll be able to energize our base, that everybody knows today we're building a historical record, that we've been able to gain momentum through this, and our goal is to realize the four freedoms. And when Roosevelt first wrote those, it was freedom from fear, freedom from want, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion. He also wrote in his own pen, everywhere in the world. And the problem is the way the U.S. talked today about economic, social, and cultural rights, it was like he said everywhere in the world but in the U.S. And I guarantee when he looked at the issues he had at that time, he knew that we'd have to have economic, social, and cultural rights combined with civil and political to really have a life that one could live in dignity. And that's what we're aiming for everyone in the United States now. The good news is, even though we work diligently and we're able to really mobilize people beyond many of the possibilities we thought, we still have more work to do. So I look forward to the time period between November and March. I think it's a great opportunity to reach out to some of the people we really dreamt of discussing these actions with and putting extra pressure. I think the good news is we did education, we did a little bit of engagement, and now our aim is to really enact and implement. So what we're going to do is a couple of things. When I return to Hawaii on November 17th, we actually have it set up already that we have this interactive television system. So we'll have all of the universities and students at the universities engaging on the UPR, and it's great. No one has to fly anywhere. But on November 17th, we'll have a discussion of what were the results and what are our next steps. So November 17th will be the first time to be able to share the information with the students in Hawaii, but also the community. Everyone's invited to participate in that. We're also going to do a Hawaii Social Forum on the 20th, where we're going to look at women's rights around the world to once again support and put pressure to look at CEDAW and how it's benefited women around the world. So we've already got a panel of women from Asia and the Pacific that will speak of how important that was in their lives. And that's those things. The rest, though, is actually going to be popular education, to engage with everyday people, to educate them more about the process, and say, there were a lot of people that said, oh, I really wanted to get involved, but I was focusing on the election. And I was like, that's all right. There's going to be more opportunities. So we really do have this window from November to March to organize a gigantic campaign to engage the U.S. government so that they do what they should have done in November and March, that they actually will promise specific things and put those forward. the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples should be one of those things that can be done. CEDAW for women's rights should be able to be done before Congress comes back again in January. There's a small window and there's momentum, and we have to move forward with that. So what I see in March is more creative process. I think the Testify campaign can be expanded in some ways. Some ideas already are, we could do everybody American loves to call and vote for songs and dancing and everything else, so we might as well do it for social justice. That we'll have all the recommendations on Wednesday. We should post all those, and we should let American people vote. What's your favorite recommendation and why? And see where it pops up, and then that'll also shape then how we should prioritize our actions afterwards as well. And then in March, the important part is we have the final say. In March, in the third week of the Human Rights Council, 10 civil society members will be able to give 2-minute speeches. So I think this is important about the UPR. We start the process with our reports being done first, then the state submits theirs, we respond to theirs, tell them where they missed out. We participate in this way by making sure all the questions are based on our ideas. And then most importantly, in March, when the report is adopted, we will say if it's met the mark. We will have the final say on where it should be and where it's lacking. And that will be the result. Is the amazing thing is in 4 years, the world will actually have a library of liberty, of where we at in the world and what needs to be done next. And if you really look at it, I mean, I've been able to work with dozens of these UPR processes. The first round is structure. It's saying, look, every country doesn't have this. How are we going to build this process and mechanism? And we're able to push that. We're looking at the National Human Rights Institution. We're looking at ratification of more than just 3 treaties. You can't be the world leader if you only ratify 3 treaties. So I think we were able to really do that. And most importantly, in March, there'll be the final report. That then is our roadmap to this human rights revolution of where we're going next. And I believe we can continue as we have along this path to get better, more sophisticated, and really push the envelope. And I think we won't stop until it's done. And we're planting some seeds, but more importantly, we're starting to see a little shade in certain places where what we've done has really bared fruit, and we will move forward. And you will see changes in the United States, domestically, but also in our foreign policy. And that is the significance of what we're doing. We also are, I think, hopefully being a model for other civil society, and I guarantee other civil society will be creative and we'll learn from them. And we'll continue working on that. So I think March will be huge. Specifically, March will have the adoption here. The Amnesty International has its 50th anniversary conference in San Francisco, where the UN was created. So I think what we have to keep doing is plugging in with every opportunity to network together and bring the cause forward. And hopefully, I think a good thing was when you saw the meeting that just took place outside, and I think we've all been in the Serpentine Bar a little too long, but people weren't on a Friday night going, I gotta go. You know, I really want. People were saying, let's make sure we learn the lessons. We're gonna have a CEDAW hearing. Let's make sure we move a steering committee meeting so that steering committee can either enhance and move into CEDAW or take the work of what happened at CEDAW to the next step. So the unity is essential, and the way we've been able to cooperate is crucial, and I think it really is building a vision of a better United States, and it's based on the people's vision. So I'm confident that we will continue, and we will change these processes that states create to reflect on what we want. And in this case, we have done some amazing work, but we're just continuing the tradition of the 42 NGOs that gathered in San Francisco in 1945. The only reason the UN Charter is as strong as it is because people demanded that it was so. And we're just trying to continue to open that door for more people to enter into the human rights dialogue.